So the state of Missouri Department of Corrections had to issue a smoking ban for any area inside the controlled facility. Now, mind you, they already had a smoking ban for inside the facility, but this is just outside on their controlled grounds, and it was court ordered. Now, again, definitely needed, but in this episode of Tier Talk, real quick, I want to explain how complicated it can be for an officer to have to give that order, because again, you're looking at inmates that may be unified against this order, and also the consequences of giving out an order to restrict what was once an allowed item and what the inmates may do in order to make sure that they get to keep that item. So again, show's Tier Talk. My name is Anthony Gangi. Thank you for subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you haven't, subscribe, people. Subscribe. Interact, engage. It's just another side of corrections, but this side is the experience side. This side comes from the professionals who risk their lives every day behind the wall. And today, who's going to help me out real quick will be Gary York. He's the author of Corruption Behind Bars and also Inside the Inner Circle. Hey Gary, real quick. Okay, so I read the article. The article's on Corrections 1. And it talks about what's going to be it's a court order to be done in April, and basically it's going to eliminate smoking. So basically it's going to eliminate tobacco inside the correctional facility. That means that you cannot smoke, which is already established, guys, by the way. This part is you can't smoke inside the correctional facility, but the thing that's going to be added now is you can't smoke in the outside areas of the correctional facility, but still within the controlled compound. So again, an order like this is an order that when an officer provides that order, it doesn't just affect one inmate or a selected few, it affects the whole population. So first off, Gary, how risky of an order is this?
Well, I don't disagree with the order. I think that no smoking in the system is a good thing. That's my personal opinion.
I agree.
It can be risky, but in Florida, I don't agree with the way it was done here in Florida where I'm at. They bifurcated the law. In other words, the inmates cannot have tobacco items either inside or outside the dormitories, but the officers can still have tobacco items. And I disagree with that because you just can't give an order not to have tobacco if you have tobacco yourself. So, and also the risk that it brings about is inmates, when they lose something that they are addicted to, like a cigarette or a habit-forming type of substance, like a cigarette, they're going to be very moody. They're going to have a very bad attitude about it. And when an officer tries to confiscate any type of tobacco product that they may have after the order comes out, it could be very risky, and the inmate could become physical.
Right, now there will be some staff that will think, well, we're not being punished, so why should we have to suffer from that rule? And the reason why is because one thing is, you know where you're working, guys. You're working in a controlled environment, and once something is deemed contraband, that contraband does not come into the facility. I mean, think about phones. We don't want inmates using phones, but we don't allow staff to bring in phones, right? Because, again, the problem of those phones making it to the population. So there's always going to be that concern that if we allow, let's say, staff members to bring in tobacco, there could always be that one or two staff members who are going to utilize that for nefarious reasons. So just to be safe and as a universal precaution, you can't bifurcate an order like this. You're right, Garrett. It has to be implemented on a universal level, which includes staff as well as inmates. But again, staff is aware of that. They're ready for that. It's a universal thing. They know. So again, we can move forward from there. But you're right. I didn't agree with the way Florida did it either. One thing I also got to say is that this is where it becomes kind of fishy too, okay, is that when you got to implement an order as extreme as no more smoking, now remember, you're dealing with inmates that may be addicted to it. They may use it to calm themselves down, whatever the case may be. It's an item that they want, they're used to having. And guys, remember, it's a lot harder to take away something that people are already accustomed to. Remember that, because they've gotten their life used to that. So you have to take that item away, and that's very hard for people to adjust. So the thing is, you don't want to do that at the last minute, which means this is where it kind of becomes a catch-22, is for the safety of staff that's got to implement that order, you have to give the inmates time to adjust to that order. It's not something where you're going to come out Friday night at 12 o'clock and say, hey, all your tobacco products got to be turned in by 12:01. It doesn't work that way. The inmates have to have a chance to adjust to this order. But again, that's for the safety of the officers, because once they've adjusted to it, the order doesn't come out as impulsive. But on another note, when they're notified in advance that this measure is going to take place, they can also prepare to hide that contraband. So there's always that catch-22, correct, Gary?
Correct. As a former prison investigator for 12 years, one of the things that comes to my mind is now, just as you said, they're going to hide this all their tobacco in areas of the prison. They're going to try to hoard it, so they'll have it when the rule is effective. They'll have their tobacco. But it also brings about a new problem. It brings about another contraband item that will be worth 3 to 5 times more than the street value, and that may tempt someone in the prison system to bring contraband cigarettes to an inmate to make money. So there's several things that are going to happen when this rule is implemented. It's just going to take a strong administration to watch for all these things and stop them.
And you know what's funny is you're talking about an item that's easily accessible.
Right.
That anybody
it becomes a big value when this rule comes into play.
Right, and I want to mention something too. Again, we talked about the officer. We talked about how tough it would be for them to implement the order, because again, it's not just they're dealing with a selected few. They're going to implement an order that's going to affect many. So imagine an officer on a dorm. It's got 100-something inmates they're supervising, and then all of a sudden they got to give that order. This is what's going to happen. So now you have inmates that may not really deal with each other, but now may unify. They may unite. And when that happens, the next step we got to worry about is organization. And lately, because the way the public's been, I also go as far as not just looking at unity and organization, I also look for justification, because lately, here's the scary thing, times are changing. And inside the prison, let's just be honest, what's happening on the outside with these protests and whatnot, that trickles its way on the inside. So you have people that believe that if they're being wronged, which may not be the case, but let's say they believe that, then they believe that their actions will be justified, especially also if they're getting support from the outside. So if ever they feel that their rights are being violated, because that's a big thing right now, well, what's going to happen is they're going to perceive that they're being wronged, then they're going to feel justified. So now you have inmates who are united, organized, and they believe they're justified. That's a very dangerous mixture for any officer who's got to work a unit or a dorm, correct?
Correct. You may have family that's backing the inmate family member, saying that's wrong what they're doing. Friends and organizations on the outside may be unhappy about this new rule. And so they're just going to fuel the fire and unite the inmates more. And officers need to make sure that when they implement the rule, that they have enough backup. In other words, staff shortages will not help this situation either. You need to know that you have someone behind you that can help you out in a situation where you're taking the contraband from the inmate. In this case, the contraband would be tobacco.
Right now, guys, on a national level, Gary brought up a good point. There's a lot of shortages across the country when it comes to inmate and officer ratio. Officer ratio is very low right now compared to the inmate population. So, having said that, when you're issuing an order that could affect the many, the officer's got to be, you got to back that officer up. And that officer also can't feel vulnerable when giving the order. Because, as I said, even when I was working on the floor myself, I always felt confident giving an order because I knew if something went wrong, people had my back. I always felt confident of doing a search and going after that contraband because, again, I know if something went wrong, people had my back. But the problem here is when people don't get your back and the officer feels that they're vulnerable, and by going after this contraband, well, their life is going to be put at risk. Well, they're going to think, well, tobacco or my life. It's just not worth it. So having said that, you have to eliminate as best you can the vulnerability and make sure the officers are protected so they can go ahead and be effective with the orders and whatever has to come out after that, like the searches or what's needed. So again, you need to back your officers up, and that's key. If you don't back them up, you cannot expect them to be 100%, because again, it's their ass on the line. They're the ones that are going out there risking their lives for the contraband. And I'm telling you something. In my mind, I'm gonna put that. I'm gonna weigh that out. Am I gonna go after this? And if this happens to me, was this really worth it? Well, get me the backup, and then I'll be more comfortable in doing that. But if you're not going to give me that, well, don't get mad when I don't feel motivated enough to do my job. Correct, Gary?
Right, and that's where I put the administrative management on the spot. A new law has come into effect. Make sure you back up the front line and make sure you do whatever it takes. And I mean, even if the sergeants have to come out of the office and go down to the dormitory to help, you have to do whatever it takes to keep your officers safe.
Now, the key here is now, once they issue this order for tobacco, to not be allowed inside the facilities, now you're going to look at tobacco being contraband. So the thing is, you're going to need that contraband out. Now, you know that, again, for the officer's safety, you're going to want to let the inmates know that this is happening in such amount of time. Let's say April, I believe, is what Missouri is going to try to implement. Okay, so again, it gives the inmates a chance to adjust, but also gives the inmates a chance to hide the contraband. Now, again, we're looking to get rid of that contraband. So there's two ways that you can go ahead and motivate the inmates to give you the contraband. Again, it's not going to be 100%, but either it's going to be through severe sanction if they don't after a certain time, or if they get caught with it after a certain time, or an incentive. So, Gary, if you had to choose which way is more beneficial, the incentive or the sanction, in order to motivate inmates to give up the contraband, what would you promote?
Well, that's a good question, and it's a tough question because we have laws on the books already from legislature that dictate how much punishment for certain types of contraband coming into the prison. And in many cases, it has not detoured or stopped the inmates from smuggling these items into the prison. So if you put a sanction on the tobacco, will that stop it from coming in? It may stop some, but not all, because some of the inmates are still going to risk getting caught having it smuggled in. And on the other hand, we cannot give prizes away to inmates who are good. We don't have a lot of things we can do. We may be able to give them an extra rec time or something, but it's a tough question, and you could probably go either way on that one and be about 50-50.
Right, and I want to say something. Me and Gary had this discussion before, and I was for giving the extreme sanction, but again, you need the extreme sanction to be followed through, not just from our level, but from above, and also if it travels out. And I just don't see prosecutors pushing charges for people that, the inmates, when they're caught with tobacco. I don't see prosecutors pushing charges on them, street charges on them for tobacco possession. But again, I do see them pushing charges on the people that are trying to smuggle stuff into the correctional facility, because again, the charges are based on their smuggling something into a controlled environment. But again, when it gets to the inmate's hands, I just don't see the prosecutors pushing street charges for inmates that have gotten caught with tobacco, especially when they have other cases. And sometimes, sometimes it's hard for us to get a drug case inside a correctional facility. So again, but I do see them going after the people that are smuggling it in. But here's the problem: is there's still no loss for the inmate. And if there's no loss for the inmate, well, there's nothing to stop them from, continuing this negative behavior, getting the contraband brought in. Because remember, for inmates, it's about big reward with minimal risk. And this kind of fits that description. It's a big reward for minimal risk. So again, I don't know which way to go, but all I know is that officers are going to do 100%. Maybe they'll get some tobacco smelling dogs in there. They'll do what they can to clear it out, but it's never going to be 100%. So part of it that we expect from custody is, yes, we do expect some inmates to voluntarily give that up, but again, there has to be some motivation on their end, because they're giving up something that they've been used to, that they've adjusted to, that's part of their life. So, again, you're going to have to kind of just figure out what can motivate them to give that up. But again, it's just I always want to prepare people for the worst, because again, if you're not prepared for the worst, then you're not ready. So one of me and Gary mentioned before, where you start doing something that affects the inmate population as a whole, you also have to worry about, and I'm not saying this would happen, but again, just let's go to the extreme, potential disturbances, or on a greater level, riots. Because again, you have inmates that are unified that could become organized, but as I add now, may feel justified. So again, just always make sure that when an officer is doing their job and you want them to be effective, that you give them the protection and you don't leave them vulnerable. That's the key here. You're going to give out an order that's going to affect the population as a whole, but that's going to affect the lifestyle that they've been accustomed to. So again, you got to give them time. You got to give the inmates notice. You got to give the officers the proper backing, so when they give this order, they could be effective with it, and just in case something happens, they have backup. I think that will motivate this to hopefully go smoothly. But again, you never know. There have been cases where it's smooth, no issues, and there have been cases where inmates have united and it wind up being a cluster of problems. So again, it can go on either way, but I think that we've learned enough at this point to say, okay, well, you know what? It could go the easy way, but we need to prepare for this avenue. So what's the best route we could take? And I think that's the effort that me and Gary gave here. Correct, Gary?
Correct. And the main thing is ease into it. And when the day comes that the law is going to start or begin, you can always push a cart in the middle of the dorms and say, throw all your contraband in the cart. We're not watching, and get rid of it now. And from this point forward, now it's contraband. Give them one more chance to get rid of it. Now, some are going to hide it, and some are going to give it up.
All right, Gary, my man, author of Inside the Inner Circle and Corruption Behind Bars. Thank you for tuning in and helping me out with this conversation. I'll have it edited and I'll send you away as soon as it's done.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
All right, Gary. So again, it was just a quick conversation. I wanted to talk about the problems with giving an order like this, but it has to be done. It's a needed thing. It has to be done. So again, I just wanted to try to give our perspective and the kind of challenges that we have to go through when we implement an order like this. But again, show us Tier Talk, guys. Subscribe, interact, engage, follow me. It's a show for us. It's a venue for us. I answer your questions. That's the key. And this was brought up to me by you guys. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. Love you guys. Cage is closed.